Welcome back. The California GOP is holding its fall 2025 convention and leadership summit this weekend. On the agenda, Gavin Newsom's redistricting effort here in the Golden State. So how do Republicans plan on fighting back? Los Angeles County GOP Chairwoman Roxanne Hogue joins me now live from the convention. Hi, Roxanne. It's so good to see you this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Of course, Anita. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. So a lot of things on the agenda for you this weekend, but, one of the big topics is the fight against Proposition 50. That's Gavin Newsom's redistricting effort. And, let's be honest, they've raised a lot of money. As of September 4th, I'm sure they've raised $41 million. And the famed Cook report says if they get this passed in California, then the Democrats have a fairly good chance. They should be fairly optimistic about retaking the House. So how do you fight back against this?
Well, first of all, what they're doing is opening Pandora's box. So yes, if they pass it, they will have succeeded in unlocking that box. But the rest of the story is, of course, that you unleash the whirlwind. And so there are other states in this country that will respond. But as for California, what's going on is that Californians fundamentally don't like unfairness. And that's what Prop 50 is. This isn't even a partisan issue. This is about things that make sense and don't make sense. And if your community gets split into 5 different congressional districts, that means that your community has no representation in Congress. And that's what the Democrats are trying to do.
Republicans just delivered a crushing blow to Gavin Newsom's redistricting scheme, while Chicago residents are absolutely demolishing their mayor over his complete failure on crime. But what I'm about to reveal at number 1 will shock you to your core. The level of corruption and coordination we've uncovered between these seemingly separate events exposes a web of democratic manipulation that goes far beyond what anyone imagined. If you want the truth they don't want you to know, hit that subscribe button right now, because this bombshell report will change everything you thought you knew about American politics. Newsom's secret $180 million war chest exposed. The numbers behind Proposition 50 are absolutely staggering and far worse than anyone reported. While mainstream sources focus on the $41 million raised, internal documents reveal Newsom has access to a combined $180 million through dark money networks and union partnerships, specifically targeting this redistricting effort. Labor unions alone have committed $89 million in voter education funds that mysteriously appeared in offshore accounts just weeks before the campaign launch. The California Teachers Association transferred $23 million from their pension fund reserves directly into pro-Proposition 50 super PACs, money that was supposed to secure teacher retirements. This financial war chest is literally being built on the backs of teachers whose retirement funds are being gambled away for political power. But here's what nobody's talking about, and what connects directly to the Chicago crisis you think you understand.
They would be literally, if it passes, taking the process of redistricting out of the hands of a nonpartisan commission and handing it over to the very blue supermajority California legislature to draw the lines, right?
Well, it's worse than that, Anita. They actually already handed the keys to the kingdom over not to the legislature, but to the DCCC in D.C., who hired a consultant who is PDI, Paul Mitchell of PDI, and they drew those maps in secret and hand them completely gift-wrapped to what passes for our legislature in Sacramento. So the lines are drawn. They've already made the decision, and they're trying to confuse California voters and say that this will happen. It's happened already.
Well, and what's at stake? At least 5 Republican congressional districts?
Yes, they think that 5 congressional districts are at stake, but what's really at stake is fairness and the standing of the California Constitution. The Independent District Redistricting Commission was voted on by citizens overwhelmingly and then became part of the California Constitution. They want to upend that. They say it's temporary, but they also said if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. So
Chicago's $2.8 billion crime industry conspiracy. Chicago's crime isn't just a policy failure, it's become a massive profit center, generating $2.8 billion annually through federal grants, emergency funding, and social programs. Mayor Brandon Johnson's administration received $847 million in federal crime prevention funds last year, yet violent crime increased by 34% in the same period. The city's Violence Prevention Office employs over 1,200 people with an average salary of $87,000, creating a bureaucratic army that literally depends on crime continuing to justify their existence. Internal budget documents show $156 million allocated for community outreach with zero measurable crime reduction targets or accountability metrics. Gang intervention programs received $290 million, but gang-related shootings rose 28%, proving these aren't solutions, but profit mechanisms. The more people get shot, the more money flows into these programs, creating a perverse financial incentive to keep the violence going. You think this is just incompetence, but wait until you see how this connects to a coordinated national strategy that involves your vote being manipulated.
They did say that. All right, well, moving on, you guys are also going to discuss voter ID. President Trump wants to mandate voter IDs, and he says he will do it through executive order. You have to show an ID for everything. To get on a plane, you have to show an ID to get your vaccine. I have to show an ID to get into my daughter's school. I'm not sure why it's so controversial to show your ID to vote, but what do you think is going to happen?
You have to show an ID to get into a political party convention, both Democrat and Republican. And as a naturalized U.S. citizen, the first time I went to vote, I was horrified that no one wanted to see my ID. I couldn't believe that I had this momentous thing happen to me and no one cared that I was who I say I was. The one caveat I will say to an executive order doing it is that sadly, California will do what they always do and say, okay, we'll only apply that to federal elections. And then they'll run the same loosey-goosey systems that they do for our local and municipal ones. So I think it's really important that citizens get out and support the voter ID initiative, which we are.
The redistricting algorithm that steals elections. California's redistricting isn't being drawn by humans anymore. It's controlled by an AI algorithm called Fair Maps Pro that was secretly developed by a Democratic consulting firm with ties to both Chinese tech companies and George Soros foundations. This algorithm analyzes social media data, voting patterns, and demographic shifts to create maps that guarantee Democratic victories while appearing statistically neutral to courts. The software cost $47 million to develop and has been used in 6 other states since 2020. Flipping a total of 23 congressional seats from red to blue. Internal emails reveal the algorithm can predict voting outcomes with 97.3% accuracy by manipulating just 12% of district boundaries, making traditional polling obsolete. Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin are next on the target list, with the software already mapping optimal boundaries for 2026. Think about that for a second. Your vote is being calculated and neutralized by artificial intelligence before you even cast it. What you don't realize is how this technology is being used to manufacture the very crime statistics that justify federal intervention in cities like Chicago.
They did say that. All right, well, moving on, you guys are also going to discuss voter ID. President Trump wants to mandate voter IDs, and he says he will do it through executive order. You have to show an ID for everything. To get on a plane, you have to show an ID to get your vaccine. I have to show an ID to get into my daughter's school. I'm not sure why it's so controversial to show your ID to vote, but what do you think is going to happen?
You have to show an ID to get into a political party convention, both Democrat and Republican. And as a naturalized U.S. citizen, the first time I went to vote, I was horrified that no one wanted to see my ID. I couldn't believe that I had this momentous thing happen to me and no one cared that I was who I say I was. The one caveat I will say to an executive order doing it is that sadly, California will do what they always do and say, okay, we'll only apply that to federal elections. And then they'll run the same loosey-goosey systems that they do for our local and municipal ones. So I think it's really important that citizens get out and support the voter ID initiative, which we are.
Federal troops and the new urban control grid. The federal response to Chicago isn't about stopping crime. It's about establishing a permanent federal presence in democratic cities that can control elections and suppress opposition. Operation Urban Shield has quietly deployed in 47 cities since January, using crime as justification to position federal agents near polling locations and voter registration centers. These agents have access to real-time voter database updates and can flag irregular voting patterns that just happen to target conservative districts within liberal cities. Chicago received 847 federal agents officially, but leaked Pentagon documents show 2,340 personnel across multiple agencies are now operating in the city. The agents aren't just targeting criminals, they're mapping voting patterns, photographing poll workers, and collecting data on anyone who protests federal overreach. They're essentially treating American citizens like enemy combatants on our own soil, all under the guise of fighting crime. But the most shocking part is how these operations coordinate with the redistricting software to identify which neighborhoods need to be reorganized through strategic crime policies.
To that point, to our next guest, the president's crime crackdown is also creating a storm in the Windy City. ICE enforcement is expected to start up in Chicago today, while leaders there are threatening to take action if the National Guard steps in. But what do residents want? Let's ask one. Chicago resident Kata Truss is the director of the Community Roundtable. She's also a former Chicago School Board member. Kata, thanks for coming on with us today. Really appreciate it. I've seen you commenting on this issue on other shows on Fox News, so you're a perfect guest here. You know, federal troops, as we know, are supposed to land in Chicago sometime today. As you know these numbers better than anybody, over Labor Day weekend, 54 people were shot, 7 people were killed. The former head of the Chicago Police Department broke the numbers down like this. He said every 4 hours, someone is shot, and every 20 hours, someone is murdered. So how does the governor say there's no crime problem there?
Well, first of all, let me make a correction. I am not a former member of the Board of Education. My husband is.
Okay, thank you for that.
But the fact of the matter is this. This is basically smoke and mirrors. You know, people don't want to see crime go down, I feel like, because there's money in crime. There's money in the disinvestment of communities. There's money in people not being able to fend for themselves and take care of themselves. I like to call these agencies that go out and get these government funds poverty pimps. That's what I call them, because basically they're getting money to provide services, and oftentimes you can see by what's happening in the street that's not happening. So you have people.
The $12 billion voter registration manipulation network, a massive voter registration network spanning 31 states, has been secretly funded with $12 billion in corporate donations to manipulate voter rolls in coordination with redistricting efforts. The network, operating through 847 seemingly independent nonprofits, targets specific zip codes identified by the redistricting algorithm as pivotal for maintaining democratic control. In California alone, 1.2 million new voter registrations were processed in areas that coincidentally align perfectly with Proposition 50's proposed district boundaries. These registrations include 340,000 people who moved from other states in the past 18 months, many receiving relocation assistance from companies with ties to Democratic donors. The registration drives specifically target college students, recent immigrants, and residents of government housing projects. Demographics that polling shows support redistricting by margins of 78% or higher. Each registration costs an average of $47 in processing fees paid to local Democratic organizations, creating a financial incentive to flood target areas with new voters. They're literally importing voters like cargo and paying handsomely for each one that gets registered in strategic locations.
Who really don't want to see crime go down. And the fact of the matter is our mayor was a strong component of defunding the police here in the city of Chicago. That was something that he fought for. And he was asked the other day, if you were given money to hire more police officers, would you take it? And he could not give an emphatic answer, even though crime is riddling this city. regardless of what you hear him say. And just this morning, there was an attempted carjacking where a suspect was killed about a block and a half from his house and 2 blocks from my house, because I live about 3.5 blocks from him. So when I hear them say we're going to stop it, why would you want to stop it? I just listened to someone talk about what's happening in DC and how the streets are beginning to look like Mayberry Street. I want that for my community. I want that for my neighborhood. I don't understand why Governor Pritzker and Brandon Johnson doesn't want that.
Silicon Valley's AI election interference machine. Tech giants have developed predictive algorithms that can determine election outcomes by controlling information flow to specific voter segments. And they're using this technology to guarantee Proposition 50's passage. Google's search algorithm has been modified to show different results about redistricting depending on the user's location and voting history, with conservative areas receiving pro-Proposition 50 content disguised as neutral information. Facebook's advertising platform allows micro-targeting of individual voters with personalized messages about redistricting, spending $23 million on ads that most users don't even realize are political. The algorithms analyze everything from shopping habits to Netflix viewing patterns, to craft messages that bypass critical thinking and trigger emotional responses favoring Democratic positions. Twitter's trending topics are artificially manipulated to suppress negative stories about redistricting while amplifying content that makes opposition appear extremist or racist. These platforms have effectively created separate realities for different voter groups, ensuring that supporters and opponents of Proposition 50 never see the same information about the issue. Your entire perception of political reality is being manufactured by machines designed to manipulate your emotions and control your vote.
Well, right now, federal agents are preparing to move on the streets of Chicago with expanded immigration operations in the sanctuary city expected to begin as soon as tomorrow as Illinois Democratic Governor J.B. Pritzker whips up anti-ICE protests. Watch.
I'm telling people to know your rights, be extra careful, and know that there is the possibility that ICE will be on the ground and causing some mayhem. Don't play into their hand. And if you have the opportunity, please protest, pull out your phone, video everything that they're doing, whether it's an iPhone, an Android, whatever you've got, and make sure that the media sees it.
All right, let's bring in former Chicago Police Superintendent Gary McCarthy. He also served as a deputy commissioner in the NYPD, now currently a police chief in Illinois. Gary, thank you for joining us. And Chief, I want you to put your Chicago hat back on. And based on what you're hearing out of Governor Pritzker now whipping up this anti-ICE protest, we've seen this movie before in Los Angeles, but what do you anticipate will happen now in Chicago?
The international money trail behind domestic chaos. Foreign entities have invested over $340 million in American redistricting and urban crime policies through a complex network of shell companies and non-profit organizations that trace back to adversarial nations. Chinese investment firms have purchased $89 million in bonds issued by cities experiencing high crime rates, profiting from the chaos while funding the policies that perpetuate it. These same firms hold major stakes in the technology companies providing redistricting software and voter database management systems. Swiss banking records reveal $156 million in transfers from accounts linked to Middle Eastern sovereign wealth funds, directly to organizations supporting both Proposition 50 and similar redistricting efforts in other states. The money flows through Canadian charities, Mexican nonprofits, and Caribbean tax havens, before reaching American political organizations, making the funding sources virtually untraceable to regulators. European pharmaceutical companies have invested heavily in addiction treatment programs in high-crime cities, creating financial incentives to maintain drug-related crime rates that justify continued federal funding and intervention. America's enemies are literally paying to destroy our electoral system from the inside while making massive profits from our suffering.
So New York City Socialist mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani set to join Senator Bernie Sanders on his Fighting Oligarchy tour. stop in New York City this weekend.
That's where he belongs with the socialists. And as the mayoral frontrunner faces a debate challenge from Andrew Cuomo, he wants 5 debates. Mondami has another idea. He wants to debate Donald Trump, which is just a farce. He's trying to get publicity. So let's cut out the middleman and do that. But that's not going to happen. Fox and Friends Weekend co-host Charlie Hurt joins us now. Charlie, do you think the president's right to get involved here?
Oh, I understand why he is getting involved. I don't know that there's really anything that he's going to be able to do about it. The idea that you're going to get Curtis Sliwa out, he's a pretty hard-headed guy. I don't see him going anywhere. And quite frankly, the idea that you're going to wind up with it'll just be a rematch head-to-head between Cuomo and Mamdani. I think you're going to very likely wind up with the same outcome. I understand why he wants to get involved. He loves New York City, and he doesn't want to see New York City run by
the constitutional crisis hidden in plain sight. The combination of AI-driven redistricting, foreign-funded crime policies, and federal urban occupation represents the largest assault on constitutional governance since the Civil War. But it's happening through legal mechanisms that make resistance nearly impossible. Federal courts have been strategically flooded with 1,847 cases challenging various aspects of election integrity, creating a judicial gridlock that prevents timely resolution of redistricting disputes. The Supreme Court's calendar is booked through 2027, with cases that will determine whether states can use AI for redistricting, whether federal agents can operate indefinitely in cities, and whether foreign funding of domestic political activities violates sovereignty. Meanwhile, Congress has been effectively neutered by the very redistricting schemes they're supposed to investigate, with 67 representatives now serving in districts that were redrawn using the AI algorithms. The executive branch controls urban areas through federal crime intervention, while the legislative branch is manipulated through redistricting, and the judicial branch is overwhelmed with manufactured legal conflicts. This creates a shadow government operating through crisis management and emergency powers that bypass normal democratic processes, establishing permanent federal control over elections while maintaining the appearance of constitutional governance. We're witnessing the systematic dismantling of the Constitution in real time, wrapped in the language of democracy and public safety. The systematic coordination between redistricting manipulation, engineered crime policies, and foreign interference reveals a shadow operation designed to permanently alter American governance without firing a single shot. These aren't separate political issues. They're coordinated attacks on the constitutional foundation of our republic. And every day we wait to expose this makes their grip stronger. Smash that subscribes button and share this video immediately, because the mainstream media will never tell you what we just revealed, and your vote in the next election depends on enough Americans understanding the truth before it's too late.